All right, so here we are reflecting back on the last 3 years of mountain biking. And to think about 4 years ago, we didn't even own a mountain bike. And now we went from not knowing how to do it to racing Leadville and having multiple long endurance races at the Whiteface 100K.
Yeah.
How did we even get here? Like, what happened?
So we were both pretty big into running at the time. 2015, we were doing road running. You were coming off of your triathlon history, and I was big into obstacle course racing. And I came up with a foot injury, like a chronic thing that got pretty severe pretty quickly. Couldn't figure out a diagnosis, saw a bunch of doctors. Turns out I ruptured a ligament in my foot. So it sidelined me from running. So I was working with a coach at the time, and she influenced me to sit on a spin bike. And it was the most boring thing on the planet. I don't know how you do it training for a triathlon. And I pushed back. I was totally resistant to doing it. And as I'm sitting there in Peak in the gym, riding this spin bike, taking a certification course in a book, just trying to occupy my brain, we had a neighbor move in who happened to own a bike shop, mountain bike shop. So I wander over there every day, and I love being in the woods, trail running, as do you. And I finally, after browsing about 3 months in a row, went over there and picked up a used mountain bike.
A Huffy.
Yeah, yeah. These guys call it the Walmart bike. We joked about that while we did this race on it. Bought that in it was like 2016, 2017, right? And then you can't mountain bike alone, and John's up for anything.
Yeah, but I'd resisted for a while. So you guys started mountain biking at Bacon, and I went with the runners. There were like two or three runners, and eventually I was like, all right, I gotta step up. And do it. And I had no intention of mountain biking. It was never even a thing in my brain of like, oh, I really can't wait to do this.
It was just pure pressure.
100%. Yeah. And it was scary. I did not like it. The learning curve for me was, I mean, I fell quite a few times. This shoulder, one of my shoulders still kind of hurts a little bit. I think from that stupid jump I tried to do with, you may have filmed that. I think we actually have that. Yeah. We should see if we can find that.
So you bought the same exact Walmart bike that I bought.
Yes.
Literally identical bike.
Yep. Hardtail 26 or 27 and a half.
Yep. Fat tires. You know, we're both just learning. We have no idea what we're doing. I haven't been on a bike since I was probably 14. Right? I'm trying to remember how to ride from back then. And we get on the trail, fall a bunch, and learn on the fly. Well, after about 2 years of kind of screwing around, we signed up for a race. I picked a couple smaller races that we got our butts kicked.
Rails to River, is that what it? Oh, yeah.
Little cross country race. Thought we were, moderately fit guys in other modes, and it didn't translate to mountain biking.
Well, that's the funniest thing, right? So we're not out of shape people going into these things.
Yeah.
And I think like you with your obstacle course racing, like, and me just with endurance. So if I have a foundation of endurance and you have a foundation of strength, and we roll up and you look at mountain bikers, and honestly, it looks like a bunch of pot smoking hippies. And you're like, there's not a chance in the world that these people can hold a candle to what I'm about to bring to this race. And I remember finishing Rails to River, and I'm like, that was awful. I'm never going to do this again. Yeah. I got walked. We were like almost dead last and dead laster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If John wasn't there, I would have been last or vice versa. Well, I think it started off with a hill climb. Yeah. And 11 seconds into the race, you fell off your bike.
And I'm free pedaling.
Yeah, I've never seen that technique. I don't know if that's a thing, but John is doing the kid's straddle bike run on his toes. So,
going up the hill.
Yeah, climbing up the hill and yelling about it as we're getting kicked around by everybody else. So that was our kickoff to mountain bike racing. So
God, that's funny.
About a year after we signed up for this race, don't know how we found it. Oh, it was a qualifier for Leadville. Right?
Yeah, well, you hit me out of the blue. I have this problem with just saying okay first and then thinking later and not putting pieces together. And I just get some random text or email from Ryan. He's like, hey, this looks cool. And
Let's
I'm like,
go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was it. Next thing you know, it was on the calendar.
So it's this 100K race, cross-country race that is up at Lake Placid, where they have real mountains, not like down here
and
in
real
Maryland.
mountain bikers show up.
Yeah. I knew it was a Leadville qualifier, and Leadville wasn't even on the radar. It was one of those, wow, that's an amazing
I didn't know
event.
it existed, like in all honesty. Like you kept talking, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I think I just got obsessed on YouTube one night and went down that rabbit hole. I'm like, let's try one of these qualifiers and let's just see how far out we are from qualifying. I mean, saying that out loud right now is hilarious. So we go up there after a few months of training for this thing, And
Literally.
a few months. And we were doing, we'll call it hybrid training. So a lot of running. You had a bunch of running races that year. I was in the weight room doing some mountain biking, not spending any time like on a trainer for extended amounts of time, right? So our biking base was very small. And we're riding hills, down the street on the single track that last 3 to 5 seconds. Not realizing that some of these mountains at Whiteface are 1 hour climbs up grades that are things we've never seen before.
I never knew that existed. Like in my brain, I never thought of a hill that would take you 50 minutes.
Yep. Didn't know that was possible. So we show up year one, and it was an interesting experience. Ours were maybe a little different, but it was hot to start it off. The grades were something we weren't used to. We didn't do sustained hill climbing. We did a lot of pitchy stuff, and it crushed us.
Yeah. We all finished dead. We were at a different level of dead and a different level of pain, but all severe.
Yes.
That's probably the best way to say it.
I didn't know you could hurt that bad on a bike.
I didn't either.
We've both hurt pretty bad in other modes, but I didn't know pedaling could be that horrible.
Yeah. And if you think of single track mountain biking, right, you're on no more than probably 90 seconds. I can't think of anything that we do locally that we're on for more than 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Before you get at least 10 seconds of like
down,
bam, bam,
turn.
bam, downhill, turn, whatever.
Yeah.
And so just to recap, I completely fell apart, died, cramped, legs on the big climb. And I finished 3 minutes before the 8-hour cutoff. Whereas the night before, we were like, oh, if all these other people did 4.5 to 5, like we're totally going to be at like 6 hours, 5.5 hours. We kept moving the goalpost to being really fast.
As we're talking about strategy 7 hours before the race, I think we went from 6 hour goal to 5.5 to 5. And by the time we were done, our conversation went to bed. I mean, we're like,
we got
saying
this.
4.5 hours.
Maybe we might be a top 10 in our age group, right? That was what we were thinking. And then as I finished an hour and a half after Ryan and my brother, they're both still zapped and dead. Like my brother had very similar cramping issues that I had, but he kind of was able to push through it. Had more biking volume. And I was
mid heat stroke,
right?
Yeah. Sitting there nauseous, glazed over. I don't think I moved from the same grassy area for the hour and a half that I beat you by, or whatever it was.
Yeah,
we were in bad shape.
So fast forward to year 2,
2023.
Well, if we take a little step back, Ryan says to me, "Hey, if I had, this is a qualifier. They have a lottery for Leadville. If I win this thing, you can do it with me." And I was like, no, hell no. I'm not. And it was like that fast with that much conviction.
You put your name in a hat.
Yeah.
Like this has nothing to do with
I didn't
our
put my name in the
lack
hat.
of performance that day.
I was like, no, I'm not even trying.
I don't want this.
and I hobble. It takes me 20 minutes to get my post-drink beer at the bar. It's like inside the ski house. And as I'm walking out, I see Ryan walking up with his lottery ticket. I'm like, oh God, I know what this means. And that started our Leadville journey.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I was thinking as I'm home watching YouTube videos in climate controlled living room a couple months prior to this, I'm thinking, even if we do, go up there and do relatively well, we're not going to qualify, but we'll know where we are. And then maybe it's a 5-year plan to really start to mountain bike and learn and develop, and then eventually get to Leadville. And it's a bucket list thing that we could do in like 5-6 years. Well, that all fast forwarded by 5 years. And then you're on the hook because you can't give up a lottery win at Leadville. Right. You might not ever get in again.
Yeah.
So after that, we're beat up. It takes us probably just as long to do the bike ride as walk back to our car that day. And we have to get ready for Leadville the next year.
Yeah.
So that brings us to year 2. So year 2, we obviously took things a little more serious, right?
100%. Yeah.
So we knew we had Leadville in August, and Whiteface was a big stepping stone goal for us, again, to come back and really get vengeance, for both of us. But John had like a bigger fight to pick with Whiteface after it kicked his butt pretty bad the year before.
Yes.
So we are data-driven, total fitness nerds. And we did, I don't know what your internet bill, if it's like per gigabyte, but mine went through the roof that year on the research that we did.
Yeah.
So from planning fitness progressions in like my piece to tires to bikes to becoming weight weenies for everything to skin suit jerseys and socks that are aerodynamic. We were all in. That started like Jan 1. We got really serious.
Yeah.
And we did a bunch of fitness testing to kick off the year. We used some new software to track, and we really dove into our training. So by the time we got to May, it was a completely different year, wouldn't you say, than the year
So
prior?
what were the fitness skills? So going
Yeah.
into Whiteface, so second year, give you the recap. I think we had like a stretch goal of 5 hours and 30 minutes. And we can talk maybe in a separate video a little deeper about like the event, like how we finished these races have been so fun.
Yeah.
Because you're like 30 minutes out and you're like, holy shit, we can do this.
Yeah.
Let's edit.
The game within the game.
Yeah, it was really fun. So anyway, we did very well that year. But then when you look at our fitness going into 2022 and then our fitness going into 2023, it was wildly different.
It was huge. Well, we dedicated our time to biking.
Right.
We didn't spread ourselves thin with a bunch of other things. You know, a couple months in the year we did, but when it was time to get ready for biking, we dove in.
Yeah.
And, you know, we built ourselves up to consistently riding 8 to 10 hours a week. And we got a couple weeks that were up over like 12 hours a week of biking, you know, prepping for Leadville and with Whiteface on the way. So a couple data points to throw out just to put this in perspective. So John, going off his numbers in 2022, from February to May, John put in 41 hours of bike time over many months, right?
The race alone was 20% of my annual bike volume.
So in 2023, over the same time frame, by the time we started the Whiteface race, John logged 120 hours. So we obviously dove in much deeper, and that just builds your base in such a different way that's specific to the mode you're on, right? So if you're crushing your runs and then you get on a bike and try to go hit a hard bike ride and you don't have biking legs, I mean, you know that. You've played in both sports for a while now. It might as well be a completely different event.
Yeah.
It's not
Now,
close.
an hour, 2 hours,
You can
very
fake
different
it.
story. But then once you get into that repetitive, long endurance, things just break.
Yeah, not even close. So some other numbers, there's a score that we use in the software that we use, Training Peaks, called your CTL, and it's your chronic training load. And think of that as time in mode with intensity and looking at data points from daily workouts to give you, you know, we could call it like a fitness score. And bike specific, John's going into year one was 15. Year two was 48, right?
Yeah.
Now, year one, his CTL score using all modes was 48. So it was just, you were still in shape. You were just not in shape for biking.
Right.
Right. And I'm pointing the finger at you just because you were the one that cramped. I was the same way. Overall fitness score year two, John was 74 up from 48. So your overall fitness was off the charts. I mean, you were a different person when you showed up.
100%. Yeah.
And we were on a mission. Like I think we showed up in like polo shirts and shorts tucked in. Like we were there for work. This was not fun.
Even our helmets were like big single track mountain bike helmets first year, right? And our tires, we had massive knobby tires. Like we didn't know anything about really anything. We just showed up and we're like, we're ready to grind.
Yeah.
And paid the price.
Yes.
And then not only was our fitness better, but our equipment was probably dialed in a little bit better as well.
100%. So result year two. So going from my time, I was 6:30. Year one, you were just sub 8.
7:57.
Yeah. Nobody's counting. We took 1 hour off, just over an hour, from year one to year two from my time. So let's say John didn't cramp and we were riding together. An hour in a 6-hour race is pretty significant.
Yeah.
And we were dead. We were empty. There was nothing left at the end, but we weren't broken.
Right.
And that is completely based upon the amount of time that we put into that mode.
We couldn't walk in Lake Placid after the first race. Like we were hobbling through the town trying to get to dinner.
My Garmin watch gives me alerts when my resting heart rate or active current heart rate, not in exercise mode, is too high. And I was getting alerts until 7 p.m. Remember? At 7 p.m. we're sitting down for dinner and I think nausea had just subsided. And I'm like, guys, I just got under 120 from a 12:30 finish.
Yeah.
Right? 7 hours ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, that thing crushed me. Year three, kind of fast forwarding on. Do we want to dive into Leadville or we'll have a future episode on that?
Yeah, so let's do like future episode on Leadville, but knowing that so Leadville is mid-August.
Yep.
So you're ramping up through the rest of June, July, and then tapering a little in August. And then we're going to pivot and do some different stuff in the fall, do something else different in the first part of 2024, and then circle back into Whiteface 2024, which going into it, because we weren't extreme bike focused, it's amazing how much I think the Leadville experience and the Leadville like deep core endurance, how much that spilled over to allow us to have a successful 2024.
Yeah. So we did a lot more development or growth after Whiteface in 2023. Like you just said, from June to August, we put in a lot of time, some big rides, and we learned a ton. So we were looking for sustained hills, right? We mimicked the course. And then obviously Leadville, you have things that make Whiteface look small.
Yeah.
So we had a ton of adaptation after that. But then as soon as Leadville was done, you kind of flipped right into running. And I flipped back to like work and salvage, home life, and all that kind of stuff after riding a bike for a year straight, not doing anything else. So by the time we turned it on for Whiteface in 2024, we had done a couple races that were non-biking specific. And then we had one small local cross-country race, and it was time. So we didn't have a lot of time.
No.
We crammed for the test. I think that's probably the best way to put it. As kind of our coach, with our strategy, instead of taking 5-6 months of like progressive prep and off-season base building and all that kind of stuff, I was hopeful. It was a little bit of a gamble, but I was hopeful that our base that we did build for Leadville was still there. And since we were doing some other things, we saw some good heart rate numbers, and I was pretty confident in that. So we just dove right into intensity.
Yeah.
And we did like a 3-month, 2.5 month, just smash. We got right into doing some tempo rides, doing a lot of threshold work, really working on some single track like efficiency and our skill a little bit, trying to tune up on that, because there's one segment at Whiteface where we got beat up pretty good. It's pretty rocky. So we wanted to make sure we get through that a little quicker. And we really kind of burned the candle.
Yeah.
Maybe one day a little too much for you when you went to Frederick. So you had another little hurdle.
I had another a Whiteface cramp experience about a month before the race. And it laid me out for probably 7 to 10 days where I had to really ratchet and dial everything back.
Yeah.
So I went into this race genuinely afraid. Like, I'm gonna let everyone down. I'm gonna keep trying to tell Ryan, don't wait for me, don't wait for me, don't, and there's no chance we're gonna do as good as we did in 2023. Like, just there's no chance.
That car ride up was a lot of that talk.
Yeah, you backhanded me a few times. Might still have some bruises, but yeah, no, it was definitely like let's just see what happens.
So since we're number geeks, maybe you even more than I am, everything needs to be calculated. On this hill segment, we're going to average this percentage of our FTP or this many watts. On the single track, here's what we're going to try to shoot for heart rate. And if we do all these things, here is the result. We got to the point by the end of the conversation and the car ride and the end of the night, right, before we're going to bed and packing our stuff up, where John's anxiety, I think, was going up and up and up, and his excuses were parallel to that, right? And like, John, we just drove 8 hours. We're missing a day of work. We have to drive 8 hours back tomorrow after the race, knowing how horrible that's going to feel. Why are we doing this? Like, we're not here to shoot for the same time. We're not here to like number crunch this thing to death, and then we can't do as well as we did last year, and we're 5 minutes slower. Like a 16-hour drive and giving up work, family time, all that for this. It's not why we're here. Like, we're here to win against ourselves, right? Like, not worried about where we're in the rankings, but we're doing better. And you need to commit to that before you go to bed right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm like, John, we're coming out of the gates hot. And if we blow up, we blow up, but we're going to go down swinging.
Yeah.
So we are going to do these numbers first in the first hour and a half. And we're pushing way harder than we did last year. And we're hoping that our training will get us to the finish line and we can hold on. You're like, okay, I guess.
Yeah, no, I told you, I'm like, there's no chance.
Yeah.
And you're like, shut up. Yeah. We're doing it.
Like, that's what we're doing.
But they were lofty numbers.
They were.
Now, this is our first, I believe that this was our first race.
Correct.
Mountain bike race. And
first time we made it a race.
Yeah, but it's
or
like,
we were ready to race.
Well, we were in it.
Yeah.
There's a big difference in mountain bike racing now that I've experienced between going out leisurely and then going in. Like, that front pack gets after it. Now, we weren't in the front pack, but we were in like the pack right behind that. Like the top 10% end of the top 10% bracket. And they were pushing, and we were in our drafting lines, and everyone was taking a poll. And I think, now, I don't know if there's a lot of like true drafting that we wound up getting at Whiteface, like real effect of that. But what it was being in that line of everyone pushing is it kept you in the game, mentally sharp. I know I said to myself 50 times, I'm like, I can't keep this up. There's no chance. I'm going to fall off. There's no chance. And you're just still in it. And now our times were essentially the first 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That's where we made up all of our time on the race. So why don't you tell how we finished?
Yeah, so we finished with an increase in time by 20 minutes,
20
right?
minutes,
Took 20 minutes off. So we went from 5:30 to 5:10. And just like you said, the back half was, almost identical to the year prior. We were able to hang on, though, after producing a ton more power, bigger efforts. We attacked hills on the first half. We took a solid chunk of time off this big single track that's like right at the turnaround. And that's right before you go into almost an hour climb. And that climb is legit. That's 6, 7, 8 degree grades. And our fitness held out. I was equally as dead. There was nothing left in the tank. But again, we weren't broken. Like we could function after.
Yeah.
And that is because of all the volume training we did in the year and a half prior. Right. It got us to the place where we could race. And we needed to get our minds ready, like for the confidence we needed to go out as hard as we did. I think that was the hardest part. But every hour we passed in the race, I don't know about you, even though we were feeling bad, I felt like we can do this. We can hold this.
Yeah.
Like your legs aren't going to pop. Like you had a motto going before and during the race, especially after your little like cramp session when you did your training ride, where you knew that you were potentially on the edge of cramping, but you also knew that you didn't need to stop. Right. So what were you like saying to yourself?
Yeah.
As this
So
race
there were
gone?
two things that there were. So one was trust the rebound, because I think what we learned through training is you can zone for this 30-minute segment and just trust that your body's going to recalibrate on that 20-minute downhill, and like you'll be okay. Right. So it was trust the rebound. And then the other one was just like, if there's a cramp, I'm not stopping. I am not going to stop pedaling. So maybe now there were other little things, because I did have a lot of cramps the second half of the race, but it wasn't debilitating.
Yeah.
But I'm always wondering, like, was it not debilitating because I kept pedaling? I made little switches in how my ankle movement was. I think as I like picked my toes up a little more, or there were like little things I would do that would relax but keep going. So it was like, I am going to pedal through whatever hits the legs. I'm not stopping.
Yeah.
And I got through, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you did. I think you could have broken 5 hours.
I don't know about that.
Because there were several segments where I just had to like throw a rope on the back of Ryan's bike, and he, carried me for like 3 minutes at a time while I rebounded. Because when you're drafting, it's probably a 50% drop in power sometimes on these like flat segments. So if I'm like side by side with Ryan and he's at 300 watts and I'm at 230, which is kind of like our weight equivalent, I'd back in behind him and I'd drop to like 140 watts, and then my heart rate would go plummet. So there is something to say about like getting rest.
Yeah.
I think another thing we learned in this race that I picked up in a training workout a few weeks prior was sometimes we do average watts on hills. But then I had this one segment where I did the same hill and same wattage, but one was about 1.5 minutes faster. So like, let's call it 4% faster when you look at the number of minutes. And I'm like, why is that? And then I kind of understood there's a difference between mashing on some steep parts to have big watts, but then relaxing too much on the false flats, or the, where it goes from an 8% grade to 4% for a little bit back up to 6. So putting a floor on your watts was actually another little secret to pick up more time.
Yeah, I think that was a great strategy. And I also think understanding the terrain too, with that in mind, like when we got to some chunky climbing sections that are like loose, bigger rocks, we would power through that instead of like gear down and spin and then like spin out and lose traction.
Yeah.
And I can remember in year one when we did that, I'm in my biggest gear in the back, right? Best for climbing, like praying that I had another gear left to help me get up this hill. And I'm watching my heart rate just spike, and I'm on this hill that's never ending, and I needed more assistance. But if I went any slower, I'd probably fall over just due to gravity, right? And I remember in this race, we were probably second gear up from that most of the time, like just with a conscious effort climbing up the hill, and we were good. It was sustainable. It was doable.
Now, how different? So then we had some mountain bike lessons recently out in the Shenandoah Mountains. What's his name?
Yeah, Harlan Price.
So he was awesome. And
phenomenal
he gave
teacher.
One little thing that I wonder if we knew just seat and body position on the uphills, how different that experience would have been. Well, how much time would we have shaved off with some of the little lessons of getting out of the seat at the right time in the single track?
Yeah. There's only one way to answer that. Are we coming back again? I don't know. I mean, I think it was a great journey. I think the big piece that we want to hammer home too, from the silver lining with this, is that year one, for the experience that we both had and how bad we felt after the event, most people, and maybe myself included, would have shut it down. Would have said, we're moving on. Let's go find another event. Let's do some local stuff.
We're not made for this.
I don't need to drive 8 hours to get my butt kicked like that and take 2 days off work to be wrecked for 30. Maybe it was the Leadville, the lottery win that kept us in the game. But we had a bucket list event that we checked the box on that came way sooner. We had still having significant growth and development in our mountain biking skill. The fun that comes with that, it's maybe my favorite mode now, where before it was just something to do because my foot hurt and I couldn't run. Yeah. We've gotten a lot of other people in our social setting mountain biking. So we have a group now that's also enjoying, social biking and racing, right? And we got 3 years of development and growth at Whiteface that makes you feel pretty good with what you get when you're crossing the finish line, taking an hour off. Yeah. None of those things would have happened if we would have just thrown in the towel after year one.
There's a big thing right now where everyone is trying to do hard things, and then there's something about doing a hard thing and then going back after it to own it, and that's a big difference. I think anyone can show up and say, I did that hard thing. Yeah. But then someone to then say, okay, now I'm going to do this, and this, so I can actually own that instead of saying I did it.
You nailed it. Right? How many people sign up for a marathon or an Ironman to do it? Check the box one time. They hate it, but they're happy that they did it, and they're done. And I encourage all of those people to just change their mental, view of that a little bit and come back the second time and earn that shaving the time or bumping up in your age group or whatever it is, because that journey is almost harder than the first one. The first one, you're all fired up and motivated. The second one, to go back and go through the suffering again and grow, that's, in my opinion, what really gives you the return on investment mentally.
To your point, I don't know. I often think about that. If you didn't get that Leadville ticket, where would we have gone? Yeah. What would we have done? Yeah. What would 2023 have looked like? Yeah. Yeah. And then because we did that, where are we going now? We're actually looking for harder things. It's like, what can we do that can make us break? Where is the fail point, right? Let's do something even. And at some point, it's not even duration, because I think that's what a lot of people look at. Everyone looks at do longer. Yeah. But sometimes it's just picking something I am still uncomfortable in single track. I watch some of the people that do it really well, and I'm still very nervous. I value my life and my teeth a little bit too much, I think. And so I'm very cautious. So that to me keeps me going back. Can I just try a little harder? Yeah. But then it's also some of the lessons that I've learned, in 2022 when I broke and I didn't give up. That was a big moment for me. The not giving up. That not giving up in that race has made me not give up in so many other things.
Agreed. Right? That was the tipping point for you.
The twitches that I had this year at Whiteface, I think the old me would have been I'm out, Ryan. Go get it, man. Good luck. And I would have bagged the whole race. And then I would have told all my friends, I had these cramps. Yeah. You had an out. The first year going through it, now I will never do that again. Yep. Right? It's like when you read these Goggins things and he's like, I went through Hell Week with a broken whatever. And I just kept running. Yeah. And you're like, oh, that's stupid. That's crazy. There's actually something to that. That's actually rewarding. But then also, I think people, I'm looking in a mirror. It's just easy to look at that one thing and say, because of that, I can't do this. Just take the easy path. Correct. That's so easy. It's in business, in life, in parenting, in fitness, race, everything you look at. And then that one little lesson that I got, and then how that transcended from there, and then spilled into all these other areas of my life has been actually really, really awesome.
And you're not afraid to do an after action report. So as soon as we're done events, we can be transparent now, which is hard on the ego sometimes, to look at yourself and say, ooh, that was tough. I was unprepared, or I made bad decisions. Or what was my suffer score? We talk about that a lot, right? Did I suffer as much as I could have? And you're the only one that knows that. Or was there a little more in the tank that I didn't go to that place because it's so uncomfortable, or because I had an out with a little twitch of a cramp and I pulled the plug? And being able to do that allows you to assess where you're going next and what you're capable of, and to go back and attack it and build on that. And that's the piece that's tough but rewarding.
And so to that point, so obviously Ryan and I are going to do a lot of these videos where we're going to talk about everything from fitness and mindset and youth sports as an example. And this after action report, we're going to talk a little bit about our kids and maybe a strategy or a way to deal with them post games, right? And having more transparency and honesty behind your performance, and not tackling it in I was awful, I'm a loser, I sucked, no one likes me, like, I'm never going to be good at this ever again, to hey, what'd you do? What'd you do great? What'd you do bad? Like, what can we work on? Awesome. You learned a lot today. Yeah. And I think if everyone shifts that mindset to that and be very open. Oh yeah, mile 23, man, I gave up. I did. My brain shut down. I mean, we've had a talk on some races. I'm like, yeah, right at that point, like I gave up. And you would ask probing questions. Why'd you give up? What were you thinking at the time? What was the surroundings? And then you learn through it and you're like, all right, let's go. And then you kind of like forget about it, move on. And I think, especially in youth sports and other things that we're going to talk about, that is lost. Everything is like, everyone wants to talk only about the positives. And they don't want to use the negatives as positives.
Correct. And we immediately want to feel good about ourselves, even if it was a bad day, or make our kids smile. Right. Because it's tough seeing them sad, but sometimes that temporary sadness is growth. And we have to let that happen after. And if we don't let that happen, there's no growth after. So we're guilty of that. So what else do we have coming? Leadville. We have an episode about Leadville coming up, right? We're going to do a deep dive. Yeah,
deep dive of Leadville. I think, and maybe even a deep dive of getting more specific of some of the training that we've done in general with cycling. I also think the transition that we both are going through right now for the rest of the year is just going to be interesting, right? So we went from cycling to a little bit of running late last year to High Rocks, January, February, and then High Rocks to Whiteface for March, April, May. And then now a little bit of a reprieve, fix the body. And we can talk about my needling episode yesterday from the PT. Oh God.
It's R-rated.
And then where does all this go, right? Why are we always picking new things? Why are we always moving some goalposts? And what keeps us motivated? And what can everyone get from that? I think there's a lot of lessons that you can get, life lessons that surround fitness. And anything for the health of it doesn't work for me. I don't know if you're like that, but like the idea of, I'm just going to do this because it's a healthy lifestyle doesn't keep me motivated. No. So I kind of need these other things.
If you're not going forward, you're going backwards.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're not picking things that get you out of your comfort zone, there's no growth. And we're also not getting any younger. So if we just let our bodies go status quo or give it the same stimulus, we're going to get worse. And I refuse to do that. And you're the same. So.
Well, there's something to say about getting excited about aging up. Maybe that could be a whole episode, right? Like if you're 48, so I'm 47. So I'm like, these 45-year-olds are coming in, they're younger than me. They should be better than me. So it's like easy for me to get like a little discouraged when I show up and I'm not in like the top 3 or whatever. But man, when I'm 50, I'm going to be a baller. Yeah. So there's something to say about aging up and getting excited about that. Yeah. Age group winners.
Well, thanks for tuning in. So check out our next episode about our youth sports and our after action report. We'll do our deeper dive on that. And then we've got more cycling coming up too with our Leadville deep dive. For anybody that's looking for any Leadville tips, tricks, training strategies, or even what not to do, what we learned while we were there, make sure you stay tuned and follow us in our next few episodes.